The space station called Greyline 9 was not a place where hope lived for long. It floated at the edge of human territory, old and tired, held together by patched metal and forgotten promises. Most people passed through it without looking back. For Aaron Hale, Greyline 9 was home. He was a human mechanic, thin from missed meals, hands always stained with oil, eyes dulled by years of being invisible. Every day he fixed machines that kept others alive, and every day he was ignored like part of the wall. In a galaxy full of powerful alien species, humans like Aaron were seen as weak, cheap labor, useful, but never respected. That night, the station was colder than usual. Power was being rationed again, and the food bay lights flickered as if they might die at any moment. Aaron stood in line with his ration card, counting the credits in his hand. He could afford only one warm meal, the same tasteless protein stew he ate almost every day. It was not enough to fill his stomach, but it would keep him alive. Survival, he had learned, was about accepting less and asking for nothing. As he waited, his eyes caught movement near the far corner of the food bay. Two small figures stood half-hidden behind a broken cargo crate. At first, Aaron thought they were stray station kids, but then he noticed their skin, smooth, pale blue with faint silver lines, and their eyes, large and dark, reflecting the light like glass. They were aliens. Very young ones. Alien children on Greyline 9 were rare, and orphaned ones were even rarer. Most alien races did not abandon their own. The girls were trembling. Their clothes were torn and clearly not made for the station's cold. One of them clutched the other's arm tightly, as if afraid she might disappear. Their eyes followed the people leaving the food counter, watching each tray of food with silent desperation. Aaron noticed something else too. No one was going near them. People avoided their corner, turning their heads away, whispering as they passed. Fear moved faster than hunger on Greyline 9. Aaron hesitated. He knew the unspoken rules of the station. Do not get involved. Do not draw attention. Do not help those who might bring trouble. Alien politics were dangerous, and helping the wrong beings could get a human killed. He looked down at his ration card. One meal. If he shared it, he would go hungry. Hunger was not dramatic, it was slow, painful, and familiar. When his turn came, Aaron took the tray and moved toward an empty table. But he could not stop thinking about the girls. Their eyes followed him, then dropped to the floor when he glanced their way. He remembered his own childhood on a failed colony world, remembered how hunger felt when no one cared. The memory tightened his chest. He sighed quietly, as if arguing with himself had already ended. Aaron picked up his tray and walked toward the corner. The girls froze when they noticed him approaching. One stepped back, placing herself protectively in front of the other. Aaron stopped a short distance away and slowly placed the tray on the floor between them. He raised his hands slightly, a universal sign of peace. "You can eat," he said softly in simple trade language. "I won't take it back." The girls stared at the food, then at him. Their eyes were filled with confusion, fear, and something else, disbelief. Slowly, the smaller one knelt and touched the tray, as if checking whether it was real. When she smelled the warm food, her control broke. She began to eat, carefully at first, then faster, tears running down her face. The other girl followed, whispering something in a language Aaron did not understand. Aaron turned away and sat on the cold floor nearby, pretending not to watch. He did not want them to feel ashamed. He told himself it was just a meal. Just one small thing. Nothing important. When they finished, the taller girl stood and faced him. She looked directly into his eyes, studying his face as if trying to carve it into memory. She spoke softly, her voice calm despite her weakness. Aaron could not understand the words, but the tone was clear, promise, not gratitude. Then she placed her small hand over her chest and bowed slightly. Before Aaron could say anything, station security alarms echoed in the distance. The girls stiffened. Without another word, they slipped into the crowd and disappeared down a maintenance corridor. Aaron stayed where he was long after they were gone, his stomach empty, his body cold. He told himself it did not matter. He would survive, like always. Somewhere deep inside, though, a strange feeling lingered, like the quiet before a storm. He had no idea that this forgotten moment, in a forgotten corner of space, had just changed the future of humanity. The girls moved through the dark maintenance tunnels of Grey Line 9 as if the station itself was guiding them forward. Their small steps were weak, but their minds were sharp because they had learned long ago that survival depended on silence and speed. Behind them, the noise of the food bay faded, and with it the last warm place they had known in weeks. The taste of real food still lingered in their mouths, and it felt unreal, like a dream neither of them wanted to wake from. They did not speak out loud as they walked, but their thoughts were filled with the same image, the face of the human who had chosen to help them when everyone else looked away. To most beings in the galaxy, humans were fragile and forgettable, yet this one act of kindness had burned itself into their memory deeper than fear ever could. Deep within the station, a hidden ship waited, cloaked from scanners, ancient in design but powerful beyond anything the station could imagine. When the girls reached it, the air around them shifted and figures emerged, tall, armored, and alert. The guards froze when they saw the children and immediately lowered their weapons. One of them knelt and spoke with shock and relief because the girls were not just lost refugees, they were the last living heirs of a fallen star kingdom, a kingdom erased by betrayal and war, a kingdom that believed honor was worth more than power. The girls were taken aboard the ship, and as the engines came alive, Grey Line 9 vanished into the distance, just another forgotten place in space. Time began to move forward as it always does, unstoppable and uncaring. Years passed, and the galaxy continued its endless conflicts. Empires rose and collapsed, alliances were formed and broken. Humanity remained on the edges, still underestimated, still treated as a minor species with no great fleets and no ancient bloodlines. Aaron Hale continued his life, unaware that his choice had been carried across light years. He fixed machines, slept in small rooms, and survived one day at a time. His hunger returned that night, and many nights after, and he often wondered why he had given away his only meal. He told himself it was weakness, not kindness, because kindness rarely paid off in the galaxy. Far away beyond human space, the two girls grew not only in size but in power. They were trained in leadership, history, and the ancient laws of their people. They learned what had been taken from them, and what had survived. Their teachers spoke of enemies and strategy, but the girls remembered something else. They remembered a human mechanic on a dying station who had nothing yet still shared what little he had in a culture built on honor. This mattered more than armies. The older sister spoke of him, often not as a savior but as proof that honor still existed beyond their fallen empire. As the years passed, the sisters reclaimed their birthright, not through conquest alone but through alliances built on respect. Their name became known again, spoken with caution and admiration. Systems once lost returned to their banner, fleets gathered under their command, and with each victory the promise, made in silence on Grey Line 9, remained unbroken. The galaxy did not know it yet, but a debt was being prepared, one that could not be measured in credits or territory. One night, as the sisters stood before a map of the stars, the younger one pointed to a small human sector nearly forgotten by the major power. She spoke one word: human. The room fell silent. The older sister nodded slowly because the time was not yet right, but it was approaching. Honor demanded patience and precision. They would not repay kindness with empty gestures, they would repay it in a way the galaxy would never forget. Back on the edge of human space, Aaron looked up at the stars from the rusted balcony of his housing block. He often wondered if anything he did ever mattered. The galaxy felt too large, and he felt too small. He did not know that far beyond his sight royal engines were being prepared and ancient banners unfolded. He did not know that his name was spoken with respect in halls of power. He only knew that long ago he had helped two hungry children, and that memory was slowly fading. But some acts never fade. They travel through time and space, growing heavier with every passing year, and when they return, they do not return quietly. 10 years passed, and the galaxy changed its shape many times, but Aaron Hale remained almost the same, older, slower, and more tired, yet still standing on the edge of survival. He no longer lived on Grey Line 9 because the station had finally been shut down and sold for scrap. When the last transport left, Aaron went with it, carrying nothing but a small tool bag and memories no one else cared about. He ended up on a forgotten human colony world called Dustfall, a place where the sky was always brown and the wind never rested. It was the kind of world powerful species ignored because it had nothing worth taking. Aaron worked as a repairman again, fixing solar panels, water pumps, and broken doors. The pay was low, and the days were long. His hands shook sometimes, not from fear but from exhaustion. He lived in a small metal shelter that rattled at night when the storms came, and he ate whatever he could afford, which was rarely enough. Hunger had become a quiet companion, always present, always patient. Aaron told himself that this was simply the cost of being human in a galaxy that valued strength over compassion. Humanity, as a whole, was not doing much better. The great alien empires treated humans as background noise, useful for labor and trade, but never invited to the tables where real power was decided. Human ships were small, human weapons were outdated, and human worlds were scattered and poorly defended. Stories spread across the stars that humans survived only because no one bothered to wipe them out completely. Aaron heard these things on old news feeds and laughed without humor because deep down he knew they were true. One evening, as the sun sank behind the dust clouds, Aaron sat outside his shelter repairing a broken drone. The air was quiet in an unnatural way, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. He paused and looked up at the sky because something felt wrong. The stars were dimmer than usual, as if something massive was blocking their light. A deep vibration rolled through the ground, not violent but powerful, controlled and deliberate. Aaron stood slowly, his heart beating faster without knowing why. Sirens began to sound across the colony, not the weak alarms used for storms, but the old emergency signals meant for invasion or first contact. People rushed out of their homes, pointing at the sky. Some screamed, others froze in silence. Aaron followed their gaze and felt his breath leave him. Above Dust Fall, a shape was forming, huge and impossible. Its surface shimmered with gold and dark metal symbols glowing faintly like living fire. This was not a pirate ship or a trader, it was something else. Something ancient and royal. The ship did not move like human vessels. It descended with calm authority, as if the planet itself had invited it. Sensors across the colony failed, screens went dark, and communication towers went silent. The ship did not fire a single weapon, yet fear spread faster than any explosion. Aaron felt small, smaller than he ever had before. He wondered if this was the end, if Dust Fall had finally been noticed by something that saw value in conquest. As the ship settled into the sky, massive and unmoving, smaller craft detached from its hull and began to descend toward the colony center. Soldiers appeared on scanners, tall, armored, and unknown to human databases. Their formation was precise, their movement disciplined. This was not an attack force, this was an escort. The realization sent a wave of confusion through the watching humans. Aaron stood among the crowd, unnoticed as always, until one of the smaller ships changed course and moved toward his sector. People shouted in panic, running away from his shelter. He remained frozen, unable to understand why a royal alien vessel would target a broken mechanic with nothing to offer. The ship landed with controlled force, sending dust into the air, and when the ramp lowered, silence fell across the settlement. Figures stepped out, clad in ceremonial armor, weapons lowered, banners trailing behind them marked with symbols Aaron did not recognize but somehow felt familiar. Two taller figures followed, walking side by side, their posture calm, their presence overwhelming. Even before they removed their helmets, Aaron felt a strange pull in his chest, a memory stirring from a time he barely thought about anymore. The figures stopped a short distance from him. The world seemed to shrink until only they existed. One of them raised a hand and spoke in perfect trade language. Her voice carried across the dust, calm and clear. She spoke his name, Aaron Hale, and in that moment 10 years of forgotten kindness returned all at once like a storm finally reaching shore. The moment his name echoed across the dusty air of the colony, Aaron Hale felt as if the ground beneath him was no longer solid. No one had spoken his name with purpose in many years. To the people of Dust Fall, he was just another worker, another tired face in a struggling crowd, yet now it had been carried by a voice backed by a royal fleet, an ancient power. The crowd fell silent, stepping away from him, as if the air around Aaron had suddenly become dangerous. He stood frozen, unable to decide whether to run, kneel, or simply disappear. The two tall figures moved closer, their armor catching the dull light of Dustfall's sky. With slow, deliberate movements, they removed their helmets, revealing faces that stopped Aaron's breath. Their skin was still the same pale blue, marked with faint silver lines, but now it glowed with health and strength. Their eyes, once filled with fear, now held calm authority. It took a few heartbeats for the memory to fully form, but when it did, it struck Aaron harder than any blow. These were the girls from Greyline 9, the hungry orphans he had fed in a forgotten corner of a dying station. A murmur spread through the watching humans as realization slowly dawned on them. The beings standing before Aaron were not refugees, they were not wanderers, they were royalty. The symbols on the banners behind them represented an empire older than most human worlds, an empire thought destroyed years ago. The older of the two stepped forward and bowed, not deeply but with respect. The gesture shocked everyone watching because powerful beings did not bow to humans. She spoke again, her voice steady and strong. 10 years ago on Greyline 9 you shared your only meal with us when no one else would. That act saved our lives and our future. We are bound by honor to repay what cannot be measured. Aaron struggled to find words. His mind was trapped between disbelief and memory. He remembered their shaking hands, the way they had eaten as if afraid the food would vanish. The idea that this moment had mattered felt unreal, almost painful. Aaron tried to speak, but his voice failed. He had never imagined that kindness could carry weight across years, let alone stars. He finally managed to say, "It was just food. I did not do anything special." The younger sister stepped forward, then her expression soft but firm. "In our culture, intention matters more than value. You had nothing, yet you gave. That made it everything." The soldiers around them lowered themselves to one knee, not in surrender but in acknowledgement. The crowd gasped. Some humans whispered prayers, others stared in stunned silence. News drones began to activate, sending images across human space. Though many feeds could not even identify the empire present, the royal ship above them remained still, like a silent guardian watching over the moment. The older sister turned to the gathered humans and spoke loudly so all could hear. "Humanity has been judged weak because it measures power in weapons and fleets, but today we stand before proof that strength can exist in silence and compassion. The galaxy has forgotten this lesson. We have not." Aaron felt heat rise behind his eyes and quickly looked down, embarrassed by the attention. He had survived by being unseen, and now the entire sky seemed focused on him. The sisters explained how they had been hunted after the fall of their empire, how betrayal had forced them into hiding, how that single meal had kept them alive long enough to be found by loyal forces. They spoke not with anger but clarity, because hatred had not rebuilt their empire. Honor had, through alliances, patience, and memory. They had returned stronger than before. Then came the moment that shifted everything. The older sister raised a small device and projected a star map across the air. Human systems glowed softly, surrounded by darker territories. "We declare humanity under the protection of our crown. Any who threaten them will answer to us." The words fell like thunder across the colony. Humans had never been protected by anyone. They had survived alone, forgotten and underestimated. Aaron shook his head in disbelief. "I do not need protection," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to eat." The younger sister smiled, then truly smiled, and for the first time power faded from her face, leaving only warmth. "That is why we came," she replied, "not because you asked, but because you did not." Above them, the royal ship shifted its position slightly, a silent promise written in metal and light. The galaxy had just changed course, and it had done so not because of a war or a weapon, but because one human had chosen kindness when it cost him everything. The silence after the declaration felt heavier than the dust-filled air of dustfall. No one spoke because no one knew how the idea that humanity now stood under the protection of a reborn royal empire was too large to understand. Aaron Hale remained at the center of it all, feeling smaller than ever. The sisters stood before him not as distant rulers now, but as living proof that the past was never truly gone. The older sister stepped closer, her presence calm but commanding, and for the first time Aaron noticed how the crowd leaned forward as if drawn by gravity alone. She spoke again, but this time her voice softened, and the words were meant only for him. "You did not know who we were. You did not ask for reward. You did not even expect to be remembered. That is why this debt became sacred." Aaron finally lifted his eyes and met hers. He saw no arrogance, no pride, only certainty. He understood then that to them this moment was not power but balance. Something lost had been restored. Around them, the colony slowly came back to life. People whispered questions, soldiers shifted their stance, news drones hovered closer, broadcasting the moment across human space. The sisters allowed it because this was not a secret to be hidden, it was a message meant to travel fast and far. The younger sister turned toward the cameras and spoke clearly, "Let it be known that the human called Aaron Hale is recognized by our crown as honor bound." The title carried ancient meaning within their culture. It was not given lightly, and it could not be taken away. Aaron felt his knees weaken. He had never been given a title before, never been chosen, never been named for anything other than his failures. He opened his mouth to refuse, but the older sister raised a hand, gently stopping him. "This is not a burden," she said. "It is a truth. You reminded us who we were when we had forgotten ourselves." The sisters then revealed the full weight of their return. Their empire had not only survived, it had grown stronger through unity rather than fear. Systems that once stood alone now stood together, bound by mutual respect. Their fleets were many, their technology far beyond what humanity had ever seen, yet they had come here first, not to a capital world or a council chamber, but to a forgotten human colony because honor demanded it. They offered Aaron a place among them, not as a servant or symbol, but as an equal voice, a reminder of humility within power. Aaron refused again quietly. He said he did not belong in halls of gold or among stars shaped by war. He belonged where things were broken and needed fixing. The sisters exchanged a look and nodded because that answer was exactly what they had hoped for. Instead, they offered something greater. They would stand beside humanity, not above it, not as rulers, but as allies. They would share knowledge, protect borders, and ensure no human world would ever again be treated as disposable. The declaration echoed across the settlement and beyond, reaching human leaders who could hardly believe what they were hearing. For the first time in generations, humanity was not alone. The soldiers rose to their feet, and the banners behind them shifted, catching the light. The royal ship above adjusted its position, casting a protective shadow across Dustfall. Aaron felt the ground vibrate beneath him, not with fear, but with promise. He realized then that the hunger he had known for so long was fading, replaced by something unfamiliar: hope. Before leaving, the sisters turned to him once more. The younger one spoke softly. "We were starving children, and you fed us today. The galaxy learns what that meal was worth." Aaron watched as they stepped back toward their ship, surrounded by light and quiet strength. The crowd slowly exhaled, as if waking from a dream. As the engines ignited and the royal vessel rose into the sky, Aaron remained standing in the dust, a simple mechanic, once forgotten, now remembered, not for what he owned but for what he gave. The stars above Dustfall seemed brighter than before, and somewhere among them a promise had been fulfilled while another was just beginning. The departure of the royal starship did not bring silence back to Dustfall. Instead, it left behind a tension that spread across the colony like an unseen current. People gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices, replaying every word, every movement, trying to understand what had just happened. Aaron Hale returned to his shelter that night, but sleep did not come. The walls felt thinner, and the sky outside felt closer, as if the stars themselves were listening. He was still the same man with the same tools and the same worn hands, yet the galaxy no longer saw him that way. Within days, ships began arriving at Dustfall, not with weapons raised but with caution. Traders, diplomats, and observers from nearby systems wanted answers. Human communication networks, which had been ignored for decades, suddenly flooded with requests and offers. Worlds that had once avoided human space now asked for passage and alliances. The name of the reborn royal empire spread quickly, and with it the story of the human who had fed 2 orphaned heirs with his last meal. The tale was repeated again and again, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes softened, but always centered on the same truth that kindness had rewritten fate. Aaron was overwhelmed by the attention. He avoided the cameras and ignored the messages. He continued fixing machines because it was the only thing that made sense to him. The colony leaders tried to elevate him to positions of authority, but he refused. He told them he had not acted to change the galaxy, and he would not pretend to understand it now. His quiet refusal only strengthened the story, because in a galaxy obsessed with power, humility had become rare. Elsewhere, the reaction was not gentle. Some empires saw the alliance as a threat. They questioned why such power would stand beside a species long considered weak. Intelligence reports were written and rewritten. Analysts searched for hidden motives but found none. The royal empire did not demand tribute or control. They offered protection and partnership, and that confused those who believed dominance was the only language of strength. The sisters spoke before their council, addressing the galaxy directly. They made it clear that their protection of humanity was not conditional. Any attack on a human world would be treated as an attack on their crown. This declaration reshaped star maps overnight. Routes changed, fleets repositioned, and long-planned expansions were quietly abandoned. No one wanted to test an empire that had returned from extinction with resolve sharpened by loss. On Dustfall, life slowly improved. Supply ships arrived with better equipment, and food stations expanded. Power grids stabilized for the first time in years. Aaron noticed the changes not because he sought them, but because fewer things were breaking. He realized with quiet surprise that he was no longer repairing damage caused by neglect, but improving systems for growth. It was a strange shift, one he never expected to see. One evening, as Aaron worked beneath an open sky, a familiar presence returned. A small vessel descended, not with ceremony but with simplicity. The sisters stepped out, this time without armor. Dressed as travelers rather than rulers, they joined him without announcement. Sitting beside him on the ground, the younger sister asked him how the colony was doing, and he answered honestly without fear or praise. The older sister listened carefully, storing every word, because to her leadership was built on understanding, not distance. They told him the galaxy was changing faster than they had planned. Humanity's story had spread beyond borders, inspiring others who believed compassion had no place in power. The sisters did not see this as a problem, they saw it as a correction. The galaxy had forgotten that survival without meaning was empty, and humans had reminded it why values mattered. Before leaving again, they offered Aaron one final choice. He could remain on Dustfall or travel among the stars as their representative, not as a leader but as a reminder. Aaron looked at the horizon and then at his hands. He chose to stay because someone needed to fix what the galaxy broke, and he had always been good at that. The sisters accepted his choice with respect because honor meant allowing others to walk their own path. As their ship vanished into the night sky, Aaron felt something settle within him. The hunger was gone, replaced by quiet purpose. He did not know what the future held for humanity, but he knew it would no longer be ignored, and all because one meal given without expectation had taught the galaxy a lesson it could never unlearn. The years that followed changed the galaxy in ways no war ever had. Human worlds, once ignored, now stood connected by open trade routes and shared defenses, not because they demanded respect but because it was finally given. Aaron Hale remained on Dustfall, still living simply, still working with his hands, still refusing titles or power, yet his presence alone carried meaning. Pilots spoke his name in passing, diplomats referenced his choice in negotiations, and entire cultures debated the strange idea that one small act could outweigh fleets and weapons. Humanity slowly gained a new reputation, not as conquerors or rulers but as a people who acted when it mattered, even if no one was watching. The royal sisters kept their promise but never overshadowed humanity. They did not place governors or fleets above human worlds. Instead, they stood beside them, offering protection without control and guidance without command. This balance shocked the old empires who had ruled through fear for centuries. Some resisted, some adapted, others faded quietly into history, unable to survive in a galaxy that was learning to value trust. Aaron watched these changes from afar, repairing engines, teaching young workers, and sharing stories of the old days, not as legend but as warning and hope. One evening, under a clear sky that Dustfall had never known before, Aaron sat surrounded by children, human and alien alike. They listened as he spoke, not of starships or queens but of hunger and choice. He told them that strength was not loud and courage was not always seen. He told them that doing the right thing did not guarantee reward, and that was exactly why it mattered. The children listened because his voice carried no pride, only truth. Far across the stars, the sisters stood on the balcony of their flagship, watching the same constellations. Their empire was secure, their people united, and their future no longer defined by loss. They often spoke of Aaron not as a hero but as a reminder. They built schools where honor was taught before combat, and councils where compassion was valued alongside strategy. The story of the meal on Greyline 9 became part of their history, not as myth but as lesson. Other species began to change as well. Alliances formed not through threat but through shared values. Old enemies laid down arms when they realized victory without meaning was hollow. The galaxy did not become peaceful overnight, but it became more careful, more thoughtful. Humanity found itself invited into conversations once closed to them, not because of power but because of perspective. They had lived small and survived quietly, and that experience had given them wisdom others lacked. Aaron grew older, and his hands grew slower, but his presence never faded. When he finally passed, it was without ceremony and without regret. The colony gathered not in mourning but in gratitude, because his life had proven something simple and unbreakable, that humanity was never weak, it had only been quiet, and in a universe obsessed with noise, that quiet strength had gone unnoticed until it was impossible to ignore. Long after his passing, ships still stopped at Dustfall. Pilgrims, leaders, and travelers stood where he once stood, not to worship but to remember. The stars above seemed closer there, as if even the universe leaned in to listen. The lesson carried forward through generations, spoken in many languages across countless worlds, that the greatest force in the galaxy was not fire or steel but choice, and that one human meal given without expectation had reshaped the fate of all who lived beneath the stars.